Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Druid High Performance podcast. And we're in the performance side of things. We started off with health and longevity, now we're in performance. This is part 3 on the performance side of things. We've looked at focus, we've looked at effective goal setting, and now we're looking at self-confidence. And this makes up a triad of performance. So if you're very focused, you're setting effective goals, and you're very confident, well, you're not guaranteed success, but you're going to get a long way there. And that's why these 3 elements make up the triad of performance, because they're so critical. As I say, we've spoken about focus and we've spoken about goal setting. Today's about self-confidence. So before we jump into that, just to introduce the channel for people who have not been with us before. So Druid High Performance, self-development consultancy for the modern world. We're here to talk about performance, health, longevity, and empowerment. So what we really focus on is helping people to cut down their negative emotion, their physical pain, and to help sharpen up their focus and their confidence so they can perform better at what they do, be that in the office, be that at home, in life in general. And this has led us to these 3 topics. As I say, self-confidence we're covering today. And so why self-confidence? Why is that part of the triad? Why not something else? Well, self-confidence is foundation to performance. If we look at sport, I like to use sport because in the business world, we can use rhetoric and persuasion and all sorts of tricks to be successful. Where in sport, that's not so easy because there is this objective winner and loser dynamic from a match of tennis or a boxing match or whatever sport you want to take, whereas there's a bit more wriggle room in the business world, and there's crossover there. And sport is really, there's this hard performance line which is difficult to get around. I mean, it's not impossible, but in the business world it's a lot more opaque, but a lot more there's a lot more options around. As long as you're on the right side of your boss, you can get promoted if you're confident and focused enough, even without delivering on performance. If we look at sporting examples, if people have equal skill, it tends to be the more confident athlete that prevails, because the more confident you are, the better you are able to perform under pressure. You rebound well from disappointment. They say a champion has a short memory. Someone double faults in tennis, or they make an absolute howler of a mistake. These champion type characters, their confidence allows them to just shrug that off and move forward, whereas the people with less confidence, they dwell on that, and then guess what? Their performance they move forward is they're unable to rebound. They're thinking about what's happened previously. And we spoke a lot about this in the Focus podcast. You have to be 100% focused in what's happening right this minute, not attending to past or future events. So confident people are able to manage their negative emotions, of course, because it helps calibrate that for them, because they see things that they have to do as attainable. They have the resources to achieve these things, whereas people lacking in confidence don't. Confident people set challenging goals. They seek to improve. They study up and explore new horizons, whereas less confident people are likely to stay where they are. They're not going to push themselves past their current boundaries. Confident people are looking for new peaks to climb. They're looking for more things to achieve. And in the business world, confident people, they negotiate pay rises. They are more likely to set up their own businesses. People low in confidence are riddled with self-doubt. They don't push themselves as much. They stay very much where they are, even when it's hurting their life, career, and their goals. And this begs the question, why aren't we all self-confident today? I mean, the literature in occupational psychology, sports psychology, self-development, broadly, there's a lot of information out there. So why aren't we improving at that? Why isn't the average person more confident now than in the past? Because we know more, you could argue on that point, but we've got a lot more evidence to suggest what people can do to be more confident. So why not? Why aren't people becoming more confident? Well, we look at modern education. Is this stuff being taught at school? A lot of the information that I've passed should be taught in schools, in my view, but it's not. Why? Who knows? Because this is the building blocks of performance and attaining these high levels. So learning the nuts and bolts of education is one thing, but also these things which undergird those elements. But, the modern world is a very complicated place. It's very confusing. It's very easy to be distracted. We talk about this a lot in my shorter videos and some of the podcasts as well. Modern world is very confusing. There's a lot of information. We're reliant on tech. It has negative consequences as well. The broader community, not sure where you're situated, but I live in a large city, London. Community is not so apparent, whereas in times in the past, smaller communities in smaller towns and villages, they'd be more interconnected. Now, everyone seems to be more atomized, more individual, not so much connected with family and so on. And so that has an effect. More children go into childcare from an earlier age, and they're spending more and more time there, not connected with the family. As I say, they're not taught at school these principles. I mean, you look around today, it's been like this for many years, but as I've become less focused on celebrity and sports stars and the media machine, when you step back from that, you can see that a lot of people are focused on what celebrities are doing, what sports stars are doing, and they're not spending so much time on what they're doing, what they should be thinking about. So, if you're thinking about solving other people's problems or thinking about the problems that other people are facing, fictitious people a lot of the time, if you're watching a lot of soap operas or whatever, then how much time are you spending thinking about what you're going to do, what you need to attend to, what you need to focus on? Maybe not so much. And you'll find that high performers in the sporting world and business world and whatever, famous literary people, they're thinking about what they've got to do. They're focused on that. I mean, how much time do you have to focus on other things? And it seems clear to me, but everyone's so distracted by whatever it is. And, I've spent most of my adult life being distracted by many things, but as I get older now, I find myself not spending so much focus on that because, you got to put the things that you've learned, things have come to light with regards to focusing on what you need to do. So I have to abide by my own observations and do that very thing. So what are some of the key findings from sports psychology? So we've talked a little bit about why it's so important and why people aren't as confident as they should be. So what does sports psychology and the broader literature have to say about self-confidence? Well, self-confidence isn't just in one area. It can be many areas. Specifically in sport, one of the elements is you've got confidence in the ability to execute certain physical skills. Also, of course, there's the confidence in your ability to use psychological skills. Also, they talk about the ability to use perceptual skills, analyzing what's around you, seeing what's going on. Confidence about your own physical fitness. Obviously, this is more maybe to do with sport, but if you're lacking in confidence in that area, that can cause all sorts of problems too. And also, something we might not think about so much is confidence in own ability, learning potential, or to improve skill level. So one of the things they talk about a lot is the growth mindset. As I say, some of these things seem so common and obvious to a lot of people, but it's even when we're talking about SMART goals from the previous goal setting podcast, what seems obvious to many people isn't obvious to a lot of people. And you'll find that a lot of people, they give very limited thought about what it is they're going to learn between now and the day they die. What are they going to learn? What skills are they going to improve at? A lot of people are very much set in their ways. So this podcast and what we talk about here at Druid High Performance is, a lot of it is about self-development, of course, which is about learning new things, learning new skills, physical skills, psychological skills, and learning and to keep learning. Something we'll talk about again and again is mastery goals, the path to mastery. And that is taking things that we know and improving the skill level of that, but also moving into new domains. And this seems obvious, to me at least, and to many of the people I speak to. But you've got to understand that the vast majority of people out there, they are not subscribed to this. Otherwise, as I say, the information is out there. Self-confidence should be improving for the majority of people. But from what I see, some of the data released on depression, anxiety, and some of the negative things that can happen with people, it's pretty clear it's not happening. So the benefits of self-confidence affect our emotional state. They call that affect behavior, what we do, and cognitions, our thoughts. So these break down as follows. Confidence arouses positive emotions. When you are confident, you lessen negative emotion, are more assertive, you're also more calm. More confident athletes and people in general interpret anxiety levels as positive compared with less confident athletes. So, for example, you're going to deliver a speech. Public speaking is one of those areas which people really, really dislike. But once you start speaking, that kind of goes away. And the more you do it, the more able you are to, because your heart might be beating in the lead up to giving your speech or whatever it is, but you could also take that as excitement. This is something they talk about, this reversal theory. The heart racing could be perceived as anxiety or it could be excitement. I speak to clients about, when was the last time you went to a concert or you went to the cinema to see a film you're really looking forward to, but your heart was, up as whatever is going to happen is going to happen. But if you're about to deliver a speech or you're about to do something you're less confident at, you're more likely to perceive that as something negative. But the more confident we are, the more we're like, I'm going to give this speech. I'm excited to give it. I'm excited to go out there and share my message. And this is what people do when they are more confident in that area, because they feel they have the resources to deliver specifically what it is. Key difference between stress and pressure. Stress is when we don't feel we've got the resources, and that's when we have a response in the body. We dump loads of stress hormone into the body, which makes us nervous, makes us experience both negative thoughts and negative feelings. Whereas pressure is something we can deal with. Pressure is what we feel. The stress is the response if we don't feel we have the resources. Obviously, if you're confident you can deal with it, then you don't experience stress. You experience the pressure, but you might like that pressure. It might focus the mind, so you got the positive outlook of that. So if you're very, very low in confidence, then everything's too much for you. And this is, happens to people which are agoraphobic. They have masses and masses of issues related to this. I'm afraid of this. I fear that. I fear this. I have this condition. I have that condition. And these people, no wonder you've got 10 different conditions. You're afraid of all these different things, and you just feel like you can't cope. Well, to me, it's much more facilitative to build up your confidence, and it might take a little bit of time, but it's something we'll talk about later as we move on, as we go forward, because building confidence is critical for us in the modern world, as it always has been. Maybe even more so because stress and anxiety is through the roof. So moving on. Confidence facilitates concentration. So when you're confident, your mind is free of distractions. Moving on from what we were just speaking, there's not this constant negative self-talk in your mind about not being able to focus. You think you can do it, and so your mind is quiet. You're able to focus on the task at hand. There's no worry when you're confident, because you feel like you're going to perform at your highest anyway, your highest level. See, confident people are more efficient in their thoughts and coping strategies because they think they're going to do it. Whatever it is, they might not do it, and they might go, I had to reflect after on why that didn't go as well as we hoped. But moving in, we talk about overconfidence and underconfidence later. But if your confidence going into something, you've done it before, you've got concrete experience of doing it, then you're not going to have this voice in your head going on and on about worrying about this, worrying about that. And you're going to experience that heart rate increase positively. I'm excited to do whatever it is I'm going to do because I need to be in this high energy state to perform at my best. Confidence affects goal setting. Confident people tend to set challenging goals, as we spoke about earlier, and strive to achieve them. Less confident people select very easy goals or unachievable goals, which results in no striving. They give themselves a crazy goal, which is just way beyond being achievable. And that way they can say, they can kind of they can bail themselves out, or they can just stick where they are. There's no risk of failure there. Well, if you set yourself a challenging goal, there is a risk of failure. But if it's slightly too much for you, find that midway point, a midterm midway goal that you can kind of reach and push yourself to achieve. And moving on from that, confidence increases effort. In activities that require persistence, the more confident person usually performs better over the long run and is most likely to prevail. This also works in recovering from injury, because something people don't think about, but every day around the world there's people which are injured and they just give up. They just give up and just assume, this is me now. Physically, I'm not going to get back to where I was. And it could be quite a mild injury, but if it seems like it's not mild in your mind, if it seems like it's debilitating and it's forever, and people don't recover from that. It's the psychology. The body can recover from, a hell of a lot. But if the mind's not willing to do the rehab, to do whatever, just doing the minimum, just going out for a walk. If you're an older person, we know sitting too much is terrible for us. And some of these people, they sit all day and all night, and their health just goes off a cliff. There is a study where they showed that if you're not walking for half an hour a day on average, then your long-term health is going to suffer terribly, and you're going to end up suffering, and your health will fall off a cliff. It's not surprised that the people which are more sedentary, they're going to be low in confidence because they're not doing much. So it's hard to be confident when you're sitting all day and all night and not doing much. And as I say before, you're watching soaps, you're really caring about what the celebrity you like's doing, or how much time are you spending on what you're doing. And it might seem harsh, but these are some of the harsh pills we have to take, because it's up to us. It's really up to us if we want to live a long, healthy, fruitful life. It's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take focus. It's going to take activity on our part. Confidence affects game strategies. Now, this relates to obviously the sporting context, but you could transfer this over. So confident people play to win. Will take chances to do so. So this, as I say, could manifest in work life as well. Less confident people play not to lose or look to avoid mistakes that lead to average performances in most cases. Now, it could be you've been tasked at work to do some report, or it could be something to do in this field, and you play it too easy. You don't really say anything. You don't really do anything with this report, or whatever it is you do for work. So it doesn't just have to be in a sporting context. It could also, it could be anything. It could be your family life. You're more able to set more challenging goals, but put the work in, put the effort in, related to the family, related to whatever it is it needs to be. Less confident people are happier to not make mistakes than do something positive. Does that ring true? I've been there. I've felt that. I've done it in a sporting context. I've done it in work. It's something, if you find yourself doing that, then ask yourself, is that what you want to do for the rest of your life? Because this is it, Sometimes we have to break our thinking patterns. We have to change up how we act. Do you want to get more from your job? Do you want to get more from your home life? From your time on this earth? Because, it's finite. Confidence affects psychological momentum. Confident people see negative events as a challenge and then aim to take action to reverse the situation. You could lose your job, but maybe it's a blessing, or maybe you spiral into depression. Less confident people see a negative situation as irreversible and can accept defeat before it happens. As I say a lot, I'll repeat again and again, this is a lot from the sports literature, but this works in the work environment or in the home as well. Less confident people see it as irreversible, their situation. Oh, it's always going to be like that. Things won't change, Momentum is a huge part of sport and life in general. A confident person takes inspiration for something small and reverses their fortune. That's something I speak to my clients a lot about, because momentum is huge. From a standing start, it takes a lot to get going, but once you've got that momentum going, even recording podcasts like this, it's the first one was always a big challenge. Never done it before, never recorded one, and then as time moves on, you get used to it, the process, and so on and so forth. You might have done a lot of creative writing as a kid, don't do it as much anymore. And getting back into that can be quite a challenge because you haven't done it for a while, but then as it starts to flow, again and again. Psychological momentum affected by confidence. Confidence affects performance, of course. Lots of evidence to support this. External and internal factors exist, of course, such as organizational structures, culture, personality, age, gender, ethnicity, cognitions and affect, another word for emotions, thoughts and feelings. High confidence without competence is not the answer, as will be discussed, because if you don't have the skills, being as confident as whoever, having supreme confidence but no skills is a recipe for disaster as well. So what we're talking about today is being confident in your domain. But it might be you need to up your skill levels, which takes confidence in your ability to do so too. Confidence affects our ability to learn as well. So maybe our skill level isn't where it needs to be, but we have the confidence that it will be where we need it to be in the future, and we're going to take the time to study, to drill and practice. Maybe you're being tasked by your boss to deliver presentations. Maybe you're not feeling as confident as you need to be, or your current level is not where it needs to be. Well, okay. Explore what it takes to be a great speaker, to present effective presentations. If you look at the back catalogue, there is a video about self-development books that everyone should read, and one of those books goes into it. It's Stand and Deliver by Dale Carnegie Training. If nothing else, if that's you, look up that book. But as I say, the skills need to be there, and if they're not right there at the moment, then you need to practice and upskill those, and that takes confidence, because some people will just be like, oh, that's not me, I can't do that. Well, no one was born with that particular skill. They had to work at it. As I say, confidence is important, but without competence, it will only take you so far. Confidence aids performance to a point, but past that point, it starts to have diminishing returns. So they talk in sports and exercise psychology about an upturned U. So when you've got low confidence, the performance isn't great, but as the confidence increases, it goes up and up and up, the performance level. But past a point, it also goes off a cliff if you're overconfident, but you don't have the skills. So it's like an inverted U. The peak rising to the right, representing a peak. So low confidence and low performance to the left, and it rises up and up and up and up and up, and it hits that peak as it's flowing to the right, and then it drops. A sharp drop. So much like the Goldilocks story, it's best to be in the middle between over and under confidence. You want to be pushing that limit of confidence, but you don't want to be obviously overconfident. So we'll talk a little bit more about the difference and what that looks like now. So lacking confidence makes you risk averse and focused on not making mistakes, which limits performance, because you're not going to take risks. You're going to kind of shy away from that line where you need to be at your best. Play it too safe, you don't say anything, you don't do anything. So athletes can have great skill, or you could be a great speaker, but after a bad start to a competition or a speech or particular whatever it is you're beginning to do, you begin to doubt your skills. And so, of course, performance drops. People lacking in confidence tend to experience anxiety, poor focus, and indecisiveness. It goes down to momentum as well. Net momentum could go in a negative way. You have a bad start. As I say, very confident people, they step over that. They step over the poor start. It's to step right over it. They focus and they crack on. Now, lacking in confidence obviously doesn't get good return on performance, but nor does overconfidence, as we just mentioned. Or false confidence is another term. This might make you expect to win in a sporting context when your skill level is deficient. So you could turn up into your competition or whatever it is you're going to do. You've not prepared. You're overconfident in the speech you've got to give or this presentation, but you've not prepared. And then, oh, I'm unprepared. Oh, negative emotion, cascade, anxiety, and you just completely fall off a cliff. So we want to have that little seed of not doubt, not fear, but concern, just to make sure we are prepared. We've done the work, we've done the legwork, so we are at our best. So you've got Football's an example of this, because in the FA Cup you'll have a Premier League team and they'll play a non-league team, and so you've got like these heavy favourites against essentially journeyman types. They might even have a part-time job, some of these footballers. They haven't got the fitness levels the professionals do. They don't have the skill level, all those extra bells and whistles that a Premier League side do, and the non-league team beats them. Premier League team's not prepared. They're not prepared to fight. Obviously, the same could happen in a boxing analogy as well, or first round of a big slam in tennis, Grand Slam champion rolls in and they're overconfident and they're not prepared. You've got a big task, project at work, you're overconfident, you think, you haven't done the legwork, you haven't had a look at it, you haven't mapped it out in your mind, you haven't had a contingency plan put in, you hit a bump and oh no, I'm not prepared, and then you realise you're not prepared, and then it's just you're not able to recover. So in the literature, they suggest that overconfidence is not as detrimental as underconfidence, because underconfidence needs time to build. Because overconfidence can be reined in. You can get hit with the reality that you're not prepared, and then you can go away and furiously prepare. And then you're able to rebuild the confidence pretty quickly, because you have some idea in that area, and it was just that you weren't prepared. So you can, rectify that. But if you're very, very underconfident, that's might take a bit of time to build up. You might be particularly sensitive to negative emotion. You might be deficient in the skills, so that's going to take some time to build up. So overconfidence isn't thought to be as detrimental, but it still can be a big problem. So they talk also about people can hide self-doubt behind overconfidence to their family or coaches, rather than being honest to themselves and take action. They might just kind of dawdle around, not really do anything about it. So we've got that upturn U, low confidence, low performance, and the performance increases as the confidence increases, as we move to the right, as it keeps on peaking, but then it drops. So again, we're Goldilocks. We're looking for that Goldilocks position of good confidence, but we're not so overconfident that we don't appreciate what we're up against or what we're doing exactly. We're focused. When they talk about being people in a high performance state, they're focused, they're confident, and that focus allows them to not become overconfident. They're not getting run away with their thoughts. They're where they need to be. That's us. That's what we're aiming for here. So there's a sports confidence model developed by Vealey and Chase in 2008, and the model has 4 components. Just quickly discuss this. So at the top of the model are the things which are kind of beyond the individual's ability to change, and these sort of filter down into the other 3 areas. So the top one are factors influencing sports confidence. So as I say, a lot of the research I've been looking at is in the sports field, but this can transfer over. So demographics and personality characteristics. You're kind of born with a lot of these elements. Obviously, personality, there is some wiggle room, but I'm of the mind that you can't change your personality too much. You can nudge areas, but you can't become a completely different person unless we're talking about traumatic experience, but that's not what we're talking about today. So you've got this person, what's influencing their ability to be confident? They've got their demographics, their age, their gender, their race and ethnicity, their personality. Personality has got some wiggle room, but these sorts of things are sort of where we start, these big influences, these factors. And then what sort of organizational culture does this performance exist within? This includes the coaching behavior, or if you're in the workplace, it could, your boss, your boss's boss, the executive group. So what's the motivational climate of the structure, the level of competition, or the size of the business if we're looking at your work. So as I say, this sits at the top and influences the other components, but is not influenced by the others, because this is sort of like the macro. The macro of this model is these influencing factors. Now this feeds down into sources of confidence, and as I say, this is in the sporting context. So we have achievement, self-regulation, and social climate. So as I say, the motivational climate is sort of the broader climate of the institution or the group or whatever it is you're part of. This is more specifically, this source of sports confidence is more specific to this team rather than the larger structure, for example. So achievement, past achievement affects confidence, of course. The ability of the person to self-regulate, stress management, focus. Are they able to train as much as they need to keep that level of confidence and achievement from the past? Social climate, how well do they get on with the rest of their team? Their manager, their coach. Obviously this has ups and downs, peaks and troughs. These are the specific sources of sports confidence. So this filters down to constructs of sports confidence. These are confidence in one's own ability to execute physical skills, confidence in one's own ability to use psychological skills. Going back to these are the same ones we mentioned at the top of the podcast, confidence about own ability to use perceptual skills. You can have all the psychological and physical skills in the world, but if your perceptual skills are out, you're not able to see the ebb and flow of competition, or in the office, you're not able to see the differences in when the company is doing well, when it's not doing so well, when there's a change in management and the whole environment's changed. Are you able to perceptually pick that up or not? Because I've not been so great at that in the past as well. So it's not something we might consider. We might be focused on our work, might be able to get on, but how are we able to sit back and see how the things are changing? Brexit happened a few years back. I was working in a company. How is that going to change things? How is that going to affect, there's the broader economic changes that are happening here, there, and everywhere. Are you aware of these? Are you able to take this on board or not? And then more specifically for sport, we have physical fitness. So we have physical skills and physical fitness. Obviously, these are separate. And then we have the confidence in own ability, learning potential to improve skill level. It's like we mentioned before. It's not something so obvious to think about, but people are confident in their ability to learn new skills. Others aren't. I can't do that. That's not me. I'm unable to do that. So there lies a continuum from trait-like and state-like self-confidence. In sports psychology, they talk a lot about the difference between trait and state. So trait is a constant level of, in this case, self-confidence, whereas state is specific to a certain activity. For example, someone can have high general confidence, that's trait, they could be generally a confident person, but have very low confidence in public speaking, which is a common source of negative emotion. A lot of people struggle with that. So that in general, someone could be high in confidence, trait, but specifically state, public speaking is not so good. So you could have someone like Muhammad Ali, a supremely confident individual, but put him in a certain context and he would be very low in confidence. Put him on, I don't know, a surfboard with big waves and he's like, this isn't me. But in general terms, his confidence is, sky high. So high in trait self-confidence, low in state related to surfing, for example. He may have been a great surfer, I don't know, but I'm guessing that's outside of his area. So I hope that's clear. Difference between trait and state. And trait and state applies to all sorts of things like anxiety as well, because we have this general sense and we have more specific sense. So the bottom of the model, so we have at the top factors influencing sport confidence. That leads into sources of specific to sports confidence. And that leads down to the constructs of sports confidence. Now there's a two-way channel between the constructs of sports confidence and the sources of sports confidence. You can't really affect the factors, as I mentioned before, influencing sports confidence from the top, the organizational structure and demographic and personality characteristics. Those are going to be there. The organizational culture can change with a whole regime change. But that's sort of the macro. The other ones, there's more of a two-way street effect. So the very bottom of the model is the consequences of sports confidence. And it goes back to what we said before. The effect, which is the emotions, the emotional state of the person, the behavior, physical behavior. We could talk about persistence and effort, or lack thereof. And cognitions are the thoughts. And people which are high in confidence, they are more positive with their emotions, they are more persistent, and they have greater efforts in their behavior. And cognitions are more economical and focused. They're not worried about this and that. They're in the moment, 100% focused on what they are doing. They might even have that quiet mind we spoke of in the Focus podcast. So now we're going to talk about expectations and how that influences performance. And a great example of this is the placebo effect. And I'm sure everyone is aware that there's been quite a lot of literature to support that placebos do work. Because if you expect something to work or you don't expect it to work, that has an effect. And there's been lots of research into this in the medical field, but they've also looked at this in the sports and exercise field too. So they had a group of people do arm wrestling competition, and they convinced people that the person they were going to arm wrestle was much, much stronger than they were, in fact. And 10 of the 12 people who went into the competition ended up losing to people which were a lot weaker than them because they expected the other person to be stronger. They've done a similar sort of study with weightlifting as well, when people have been told that the weight they're putting up is the same weight as they've previously lifted, but it's actually heavier and beyond their personal best, and they've lifted it. So essentially, our expectation sets our performance limits. If someone truly believes they have no sort of limit of the level of performance, who knows where they can get? Who knows to what heights? But if I can't do this, we've all met people in our life which are can be very negative or very limited in their beliefs. And when you live like that, then you don't push yourself, as we said before, with confidence and goals. So one interesting example of that is when horses and elephants are young in captivity, they are tethered, especially elephants, they're tethered to a pole which is too heavy for them to move, and they kind of learn quickly they can't move it, and they kind of give up on trying to tear themselves away from it. By the time they're a full-grown elephant, though, they have the power to just rip that out of the ground, no problem. But because they've been conditioned as a young elephant to feel that they can't do it, their expectation is that it's too strong for them to do, and so they don't. Same with horses, and these frames are set in us too when we're young. If you have a parent there who's just like, you can achieve anything, encourages them, and then they're more likely, that child, to grow up and have this level of confidence when they feel they can achieve things. Whereas if they're told many, many times they won't achieve this, they won't achieve that, they start to believe it. Now, that might be you out there, but this can be reversed. Self-talk allows us to replace that voice in our mind, and this is what we're talking about today. So expectations, if you have expectations that you can't do a certain thing, then is that true? Is that really the case, or is that something you've learned in your childhood? If that's the case, where you have these expectations, where you feel like you can't do these things, well, maybe those are things that you should really take another look at, because maybe you've achieved things in your life which reverses that opinion, or should do. Maybe you've already achieved things, but you're just not giving that the attention it requires. So as I said, there's evidence in weightlifting and arm wrestling. I did find one study where they were talking about weightlifters were told they were given steroids when they weren't. Not sure about how that got past the ethics committee on that one, but they were given saline solution injections or whatever it was, and they were told it was steroids, and they went on to lift heavier weights than they thought they could do before. But it was a placebo, as we mentioned. So another one is table tennis players that observed opponents with positive behavior and confidence underperformed compared with other participants that observed negative behavior in their opponents. So when you perceive your opponents, you could be a job interview and the person comes out looking really, really confident. They've just gone in, they've come out, they walk out very confidently. You're like, oh, wow, that's me done. Compared with the person comes out with hunched shoulders, looks like they've absolutely bombed in that interview. So, there's evidence there from table tennis that when you observe your opponents and they are displaying positive behavior, some people take that as to mean, oh, I can't get this job. Expectations on performance are huge. So this is self-expectations, of course, but there's also coaching expectations, and as I repeat many times, also outside of sport, your boss, they have expectations on your performance and how that affects confidence and so on. So there was a famous study called the late bloomers study, where random students were given extra support from teachers to achieve high performance. Basically what happened was the researchers came to the teachers and said, these children in your classes are late bloomers and they are going to have a big jump in IQ and performance and so on and so forth. These were randomly assigned kids. They were just, no different from any others. But what they observed was that the teachers, because they thought these kids were late bloomers, they gave them a lot of reinforcement, a lot of extra time and extra focus, and basically it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. These kids were identified as late bloomers, got the extra studying and teaching in with these teachers, and they ended up being late bloomers, which is quite an interesting study indeed. So, yourself, if no matter what you do, your manager at work doesn't give you encouragement, then it can easily start to grind on you, and you think to yourself, why bother? Why bother putting the work in, and so on and so forth. So these expectations have an effect. Obviously, if it's really having an effect, then there might be time to look for a new role, but that's a conversation for another day. But just to say that coaches or managers at work, they do have an effect through their expectation. And so there's that late bloomer study, but also similar results were found in physical education and in competitive sport. So there was a study looking at collegiate basketball coaches and how some of them assessed players using 10 items for judging. All items were psychological rather than physical, which is interesting because all of these players were of a certain physical ability, was the argument. So not all coaches were swayed by these measures, but a significant portion were suggesting coaching expectations had a big influence on selection and performance in the sporting context. So how does this break down? So they look at this in the literature. So step one, the team comes together and the coaches start to form expectations in their mind, and these can be based on person cues or performance information. So the person cues are similar to the factors influencing sports confidence. These are things such as race, age, sex, size. So these are kind of a bit more, these are fixed, these are characteristics, but these can be wildly wrong. You can observe someone who looks kind of wiry and skinny, but they could be strong, quick, fast, or whatever. All the performance information, such as past performances, skills, tests. So obviously when you got a collegiate program, they would do, sprint tests, strength tests, things like this. Past performances in high school or whatever. Practice behaviors and other coaches' evaluations. So these are all the things that the coaches are using to form their expectation. So a large study identified 4 categories of the above. So the performance information and person cues. One of them being coachability, how easy they are to coach, how much they listen to coaches. So you could have someone who's got great talent, but they're not very coachable. Another one who's not so blessed with athletic ability, but they're very coachable. Physical ability is another one of the categories. Being a team player is another. Not being the superstar type, but they actually involved with a team there. And you got that maturity as well. So a large study identified 4 categories of how coaches make expectations. Coachability, physical ability, being a team player, and maturity. So when assessment is accurate, based on the coaching expectations, it's not so much of a problem. But when these are not accurate and coaches are inflexible, it can cause issues with coaching behavior. So human beings, we set frames in our minds, and once we've kind of made a decision, sometimes we'll double and triple down even though the evidence is to the contrary. And so we might get this impression that this person, we're a manager and they work for us, or we get the expectation going, but they're not very talented, they're not very mature in what they're doing or whatever. And we get set in our ways about that, even though there's strong evidence that that's changing. So step 2, coaches' expectations influence behavior. So it influences the frequency and the quality of the coach-athlete interaction. So the coach spends more time with the high expectation athletes. They get all the attention. Just like late bloomers research we looked at, the coach gets the idea in their head that this is a new superstar, so they're going to focus a lot of their attention on this person. But then there's this diamond in the rough there. They don't get as much attention. So the coach will show more warmth and positive affect, emotion towards the high expectation athletes and make more of an effort. A lot of this sort of unconsciously happens. As I said, keep saying works in a work environment as well. This new hotshot college graduate comes out and the CEO of the company loves this person, takes them under their wing, very positive with them. They spend more time and they kind of impart more knowledge on them. So that's the frequency and the quality. The quantity and the quality of instruction is the next area. So the coach lowers high expectation of what skills some athletes will learn, thus establishing a low standard of performance. So, someone might struggle in the early part of a new role, and the coach will just say, oh, this person can't cope with more difficult tasks, I won't bother. They can just stick doing these mundane tasks. It might be that person's just not particularly skilled in a specific area, but they can learn that quickly, and so on and so forth, As I say, human beings get this idea in their minds, and they're very good at setting frames. Sometimes these frames are wildly off. So another one would be coach allows the athletes whom he expects less of correspondingly less time in practice drills. So they're not expecting much of an improvement in performance, so they get less time in practice drills, and that becomes self-fulfilling, of course. They're not getting the quantity and quality of instruction. It's not there. The coach is less persistent in teaching difficult skills to low expectation athletes. And again, in management, it can be the same in the office. Once you get into your head that person can't learn a certain task, then people just assume that's how it's going to be. But in 3 months' time, that person could be anywhere with that particular skill. And then the next area is type and frequency of feedback. So the coach provides more reinforcement and praise for high expectation athletes after a successful performance. Coaches provide quantitatively less beneficial feedback to low expectation athletes, such as praise after a mediocre performance. So it might be just one short little, bit of encouragement from the less expectation athlete could see them transcend onto the next level because, they performed kind of mediocrely, but there was one thing they did very well. Could the coach have pointed that out? The manager pointed out that task you did at work, that area you improved at, because momentum, we go back to that talk about momentum. That bit of encouragement from your manager or coach there could be enough to spur that person on to new heights. Coach gives high expectation athletes more instructional and informational feedback. Essentially what we're saying here is the coach, they stick to their opinions a lot of the time, some won't, a lot will, and that affects their behavior. So coaches can create a learning-orientated environment or an outcome-orientated environment. As I say, this works in the office space too, especially in sales. The outcome environment is geared to winning at all costs, where the learning-orientated environment is geared towards constant improvement and refinement. So in the sales environment, I've worked in sales before, it's all about how many leads have you got? How many have you sold? It's not about how well you're doing at the job. And I get it, it's a very outcome-based industry. But if someone's going to be better long-term as a salesman, they have to refine, improve. If it's all about the outcome, maybe, the luck was with you that day. Got a bit of a hot streak, but are you improving, or are you just thinking that you're expecting it? Are you overconfident, or are you getting more skilled? So you might, the person who's more focused on the mastery, the task-based, they're putting the work in, they're learning the script in this example, they're very focused in their listening, they know the product inside and out, they're getting better at maneuvering their clients through the sales cycle, and so in 3 to 6 months they're at a different level than the person who was doing well before. And this idea is very much linked to the outcome goals versus mastery goals of achievement goal theory that we talked about in the goals podcast. Outcome goals is just winning. Mastery goals is about improving at the task that you are doing. See, problems with the outcome-based approach is the coach will sometimes reprimand the athletes with which they have low expectations for the same actions they would praise the athletes doing the same as high expectations. An example of I saw of this one was, so in a basketball game at certain points it's not worth taking the shot. The person the coach has great faith in might take the shot and win the game and it's great, happy days, but over the course of time that's going to end up them losing games. So the low expectation athlete takes that shot and the coach is reprimanding that person, whereas the high expectation, they're like, well done, you won us the game. But long term, they're not going to always hit that shot because that's not the time to be hitting that shot. That, in football terms, that's not the time to be shooting. That's the time to cross the ball to someone else who's in better position. Now the goal might go in, and the manager's happy as Larry for that one. But in a task-based environment, we're always looking to do what's best. What's the best thing to do? What's the best thing to do at the right time? And you can see this in the high-level sport. You can see this in the business context. You can see it everywhere. You could be taking your kids through their homework. They might do well on a test, which they got lucky with, but they didn't really put the work in. So it might be the kid who's struggling now, but he puts the time in. They're improving. The person who's got a natural ability in mathematics, it gets overtaken by the person who had to struggle, but eventually they overtook him. Happens all the time. So we're looking about how expectations of the coach this is. So now we're on step 3. Step 3, coaches' behaviors affect athletes' performance. So we're talking about how the expectation of the coach is set, and then that their behavior is set by their expectation. And now we're talking about the coach's behavior affects the performance. So low expectation athletes exhibit poor performances because they receive less effective reinforcement, as we said, and get less playing time. So low expectation athletes exhibit lower levels of self-confidence and perceived competence over the course of a season, because they're not getting the feedback, they're not getting that reinforcement, they're not getting the encouragement they need from the coach because of these preconceived ideas. So the low expectation athletes attribute their failures to a lack of ability, thus substantiating the notion that they aren't any good and have little chances of future success. So they've got that. The coach sets a frame in their mind which they think is reality, and then the athlete does the same. And as I keep saying, the worker in the office. Motivation also can obviously be affected by all this. The final piece of this expectation model for coaches is that the athlete's performance confirm the coach's expectations. The preconceptions that the coaches form tend then to solidify in their mind of the athlete's competency. Some athletes find support from other sources and go on to improve anyway, but some do not. Some coaches change their evaluation, but many are quick to stick with the labels that they have given, because people like to double down and triple down with their decisions from the past. Not everyone, but that is very common. So if you're in a situation where you're not getting the support from your manager, your coach or whatever, look at it objectively. Is it because they're stuck in their ways with their expectations? Is it maybe a time for you to move on in your sport or your work? Or are they flexible? Are they the sort of managers that come around and encourage you as they see your performance improve? Do they say, I had you picked at this sort of guy, but I was wrong? Brilliant. Happy days. All these things bearing in mind, because as we said before, people are low confidence. With low confidence, they stick in places they should probably move on to somewhere else because they get very much kind of stuck in this way of thinking. So a lot of this is based on a theory within cognitive social psychology, as well as which kind of leads into the sports. So this will affect occupation as well as sports psychology. It's called self-efficacy theory. This is from a famous researcher called Bandura. Go into a little bit more about self-efficacy theory. Self-confidence is broad idea, whereas efficacy is self-confidence in a specific domain. Confidence to perform a task in a specific domain based on Bandura's model of self-efficacy. So This was later redefined to include performance in line with anticipated outcomes. So that's why we spoke about anticipation and expectations. Overall efficacy has been termed self-regulatory efficacy and focuses on a person's ability to overcome obstacles or impediments to performance. Other forms of efficacy include learning efficacy, decision-making efficacy, coping efficacy, self-presentational efficacy, how we present ourselves to our opponents in the sporting context or our colleagues and management in work. Other efficacy, so anything which doesn't fit within those previous ones will go in that. So that's all well and good. What are the key assumptions of self-efficacy? If someone has the skills and the motivation to achieve a goal, self-efficacy is the main determinant. Self-efficacy without skill and motivation will not get it done. So self-efficacy affects choice of activity, effort, and persistence. People with belief tend to persevere. Self-efficacy is task-specific, but it can transfer to similar situations and skill domains. So if you're good at guitar, you could quickly get good at bass guitar. It's not exactly the same, but there is some transfer. Self-efficacy affects goal setting. Those high in self-efficacy set more difficult goals. We talked about this earlier. There is an argument that people in low self-efficacy will set such difficult goals that then they've got like a built-in excuse for not hitting them. There's the key assumptions. We kind of touched on it before, but those are useful to know. I mean, along the short story of it is self-efficacy is self-confidence in a specific domain. So the domain that is most pertinent to you, important to you, or some area that you'd like to be more self-efficacious in, so self-confident in, is going to take focus. But that's worth thinking about. Where in the future do I want to have my confidence levels at, and what specific domain? Because there's a million different types of domains. We can't be confident in all of them. We can have general self-confidence, but we want to have self-efficacy in specific areas which are important to us. So that's worth thinking about, and this is why self-confidence is part of the triad of performance, as discussed. So next we're going to talk about the sources of confidence. So what sources can we draw confidence from? So number one, as so says the literature, is performance accomplishments. So this is noted as being the most dependable foundation of self-efficacy. And that's pretty clear because it's concrete and based on mastery experiences in the domain in question, although contextual factors have an effect, such as audience presence, resources available, situational barriers. So, you might compete at a certain level of a sport, and obviously it's quite specific. The sport doesn't change when you go to a bigger competition, but the audience presence might be a lot bigger, and that might change your confidence. I mean, the actual act is not different, but you see it all the time. Winning one level of a tennis tournament is different from Grand Slams. Winning a boxing championship for Britain or being the champion of England is a whole different kettle of fish to being world champion. The amount of press that comes with that, the amount of distractions, it can change the context in people's minds, and that makes all the difference. I went to a festival the other day, and playing a small bar with 20 people is a big difference between playing a festival of 10, 15,000 people. Essentially, you're doing the same thing, but it's different in your mind. Successful experiences will raise self-efficacy, whereas repeated failures will likely lower efficacy. This can apply to pure performance, injury recovery, exercise adherence, and fitness improvement. So it's something you may not think about so much, but recovering from injury, efficacy can relate to that. Because when you see improvement, you've coming back from a muscle injury, but then you're starting to get flexibility in that muscle back. That can kick on more practice, more confidence that it's going to have the effect. Because when sometimes you have an injury, you feel like initially you're not going to get back to where you were. Then you start to get that improvement, and so on and so forth. One interesting game or sport is golf, because golf, they have a handicap, which is like an overall ability measure. What's interesting about golf is that handicap is overall ability, which is created over a long time. Whereas individual performances, you might do a lot better than your handicap, but that handicap is the performance level over time. And so there was an example of, they looked at experienced compared to inexperienced golfers, and they found that the experienced golfers relied on their overall ability, another word for handicap, compared with lesser experienced golfers, and they were thinking more about how they were playing at the moment. So the self-confidence of the experienced golfer is, I'm a -3 player. I will, I'm not playing so great now, but I will come back to my performance level. Whereas inexperienced, it's very much hot and cold. Performance is going which way the wind blows, because they don't have that build up of experience. So something that coaches can do to help their charges, or managers can help with their employees. Coaches can use activity logs and progress charts, as well as guiding the people which are under them through complex routines bit by bit, and using smaller pitches or pools for swimming routines or field-based sports. So, as I say, past performance accomplishments are the most concrete pool, a source rather, of confidence, because it's concrete. But previously we might have performed at a certain level, but we might dip down, and then we might have to make changes. We might have to go back to performing in smaller clubs if we're a musician. Previously we did big shows, but we lost our confidence. Or you can play football in 5-a-side rather than 11-a-side. Or it's trying to find methods to re-establish that level of performance from back in the past. So, source of confidence, number 1, is past accomplishments. Number 2 is vicarious experiences. So seeing others achieve levels of performance can allow athletes to model them through copying. Now, the most famous example of this is the 4-minute mile story by Roger Bannister. I'm sure most people are aware of this one, but in case you're not, back in the time of the 1960s, around there or thereabouts, Roger Bannister was a part-time athlete. He set a goal on running a sub 4-minute mile, and that was thought to be impossible. People got close, but they're never able to break that milestone. But he did it. He broke the 4-minute mile, and then within a year, several people had done it because they saw he had done it, and then they went on to do it themselves. An example, you might be training with a certain person, or you might be working with someone, and they've been given this task to do, or they have to perform at a certain thing, and you see them train hard, they're diligent, they are focused, and they do it, and that gives you the motivation to do the same. You can kind of copy their methodology, how they did it. Maybe it needs to be slightly different to accommodate you, but that gives us a sense of confidence because, hey, that person did it, I can do it too. Someone from your neck of the woods, they perform and they get to my wife's Colombian, and Egan Bernal won the Tour de France, first Colombian to do so. There was another Colombian whose name escapes me at the moment who did very well in the Tour de France, but Egan Bernal came along, he's won. And so all the Colombians, or maybe even more broadly speaking, the South Americans are like, oh, first South American to win the Tour, we can do it too. Why not? So there's evidence in the literature of teammates doing things they could not after their teammates complete a gymnastic routine. So they see their teammate perform a vault, and then they think to themselves they can do it. So in Bandura's self-efficacy model, he identifies 4 stages of vicarious experiences, or modeling. So it's the attention required to focus on the key teaching points, and having respect for the model as well. If you have true respect for the person that you're copying, that's going to have a lot more of a motivating effect on that. Second stage of then is retention. So you've paid attention to the model, they're doing what they're doing. Think Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. Kobe Bryant just copied his style, all his moves. So retention, you got to pay attention to the model first, and the second stage is retention, using mental imagery and analogy to focus attention and to make it deeply remembered in the mind so that they can retain it at will. So that practice in the mind has to be focused over and over. Then motor reproduction, so physical practice until unconscious processing occurs. So you have to focus on the model, you have to retain what you've learned, but then you have to put it into practice. The physical practice to make that unconscious, because as we know, in a high performance setting, we can't be thinking consciously of what we're needing to do, because that's too slow. We can't be in the moment if we're thinking consciously about what we're having to do. So attention, retention, motor reproduction, and then we're on to motivation. So that's the use of praise, communication of the rewards of good techniques, etc. So that's worth thinking about. If you've not done something in the past, as we say, your past accomplishments is the most concrete, but if we haven't achieved that level, then we need to look at other people who have achieved, find inspiration. Attention, retention, motor reproduction, and then the motivation. To get yourself at that correct arousal level, that correct spot, so that you can kind of get in that zone, give yourself that energy so you're able to get in there and perform at this level. Number 3 sources of confidence. The third one is verbal persuasion. This could be self, coach, or teammate encouragement has shown to be very effective. And if your coach isn't there or your manager's not there, maybe you have to be the source of your own verbal persuasion. And doing that can take some discipline too. Focused on good practice. As I said before, champion mindset has got a short memory, so it's not about thinking too much about the mistakes, it's about what you've done correctly there. Persuade yourself that you can do that more. The next one is imaginal experiences. That's imagery of self-mastery seen as effective as a source of confidence. I'm a big advocate of both the self-talk and the imagery, and that'll be the focus of a future podcast. But the more time we spend seeing ourselves doing things in our mind's eye, the less conscious thought we'll have required to do that in the future. As I said in the top of the podcast, a lot of people are focused on what celebrities are doing, their favourite sports stars. They're not very much thinking about what they're doing though. Now, if you spend time every day of your life thinking about what you've got to do in the future and how you're going to do it, and seeing yourself doing it and persuading yourself that you can do it, I mean, who knows what you could achieve, really? People don't. They think about everything else but what they have to do. Imaginal experiences. You've got a competition coming up, see yourself doing well in that competition every day. Morning, noon and night. And if you're really motivated to do it, you probably do it without thinking. But other topics not. I remember Wayne Rooney, before he would play a game of football, the day before he would daydream the match. See himself playing well, scoring goals, passing here and there, Didn't even have to think about it. And when they talk about imagery, it's not just visual as well. It's also you're talking about emotions, sounds, feelings, even smells. There's a room where you have to give a presentation. Go in the room. What does it say? Is there a certain smell? Maybe there's a Glade herbal smell in there. Whatever it is. So you have to think about that smell, put you in that place. So when you walk in there, you get a really good sense of what that environment is like. The more concrete, the more solid that is, the more senses it touches, the better it is. If we're just kind of, low resolution can have its place as a starting point, but we want to get more and more refined with the resolution as we go. So it's very, very clear. So when we're stepping into that place to do that talk or perform or whatever it is, we feel like we've done it before. We feel like we've already done it. And we're kind of being carried along. It's the old horse and the cart analogy. If our mind's in the right place, the horse is in front of the cart, and we're not thinking. I'm not thinking now as I speak too much, because it would just be, it's like anything. We do millions of things without thinking, and the more we can get the horse in front of the cart, we can get that performance level at the right pitch. Because if I'm thinking about everything I'm doing now, then it's not gonna result in a good, a clear conversation with you guys. I couldn't even walk across the street if I really think about it. It's just, you get all paralysis from analysis and all that stuff. So, imaginal experiences as well as verbal persuasion, very important. Next one is physiological states. So this is high arousal, is when your heart's beating, your breathing is at a higher pitch, everything's pumping. Low arousal, you're very relaxed, you're breathing very slowly. These can be interpreted as anxiety, the high arousal, or negative, whereas others perceive that as a facilitative. So the physiological state. So I always like to give the example of Rafa, Nadal, Roger Federer, of course. So people have different areas where they perform when it comes to the arousal level. So some people like to perform when their heart's beating, they're sweating, they're ready to go. Rafa Nadal about to come on court. He's doing jump squats, jumping up and down. He's jumping up and down like he's getting his second wind. Whereas Roger Federer's just like, preening, strolling onto court. He's not sweating. He's relaxed. Now, if Rafa steps on court and he's feeling like Roger, he'd probably start to feel like this isn't right. I'm not in the right space. My high performance zone here. I'm too relaxed. My limbs feel heavy, dead. Whereas Roger, if he was jumping up and down like Rafa, he'd probably be like, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling a bit unfocused, a bit all over the place. If you feel like you're in the right physiological state, that gives you that sense of confidence because you know where you perform at your best. I had a boxing match years ago. The trainer was trying to warm me up before the fight, and I was just like, I'm a bit more like Roger. I can't be walking out to box and I'm already tired, sweating. I like to be more like Roger Federer here, whereas other people, they want to be jumping up and down, they want to be getting their second wind, and that's what he said, that my trainer, he was like, I want to feel like I've got my second wind as I go out. That's not me. You got to find what works for you. So funnily enough, for that match, I come out already feeling a little bit kind of heavy, so my confidence wasn't where it needed to be. You go to another time when performed at my best in a jiu-jitsu competition, I wasn't thinking about all this stuff. I felt comfortable where I was. And this leads into the next one, which is emotional state. So we've got physiological state, arousal level, emotional state. So positive emotions obviously linked with higher self-efficacy, whereas negative emotions linked with lower self-efficacy. And that makes a lot of sense, of course. If you're feeling confident, comfortable, that imagery can help with this. As I say, if you're stepping into an environment which is unknown, that can have an effect on your confidence because you're not been there before. There's a certain uncertainty, but you know the place, you know the smells, the sounds are very comfortable. You feel like you know the place, you feel at home there. There's no anxiety, there's just this comfortable feeling. Emotionally you're feeling great. It's no wonder that's linked to self-confidence. Because where there's uncertainty, that can lead to doubt. Doubt can lead to anxiety, negative emotion. Then we can have that cascade of negative thoughts, no good. We want to step out there feeling like we know. We know where we are. We know what we have to do. So there is a reciprocal relationship between efficacy and behavior change, which is more from the exercise psychology literature. So this is for people which are looking to exercise for weight loss and for health. So self-efficacy linked to better adherence in exercise programs for older adults, symptomatic populations, so people which have got certain medical issues, adherence once the program is finished. So you're less likely to stick with a routine if you don't feel confident doing that routine, of course. If you feel very confident in that routine, you're more likely to stick with it. So if someone is confident about a technique, routine, or program, they are much more likely to utilize and stick with it long term, which results in behavior change. So we have to make that a habit to get the benefits, because when we're not comfortable doing something, we're not confident, we can get sort of this feeling that we're not very skilled in this, and people don't like to feel like that. People like to feel they can do something, or they kind of go just give up. It's not for me, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, of course. So if you are trying to get back into exercise, nail a couple of simple exercise patterns, movements. So if you're going in there and you're feeling a bit lost, choose 2 or 3. Get comfortable with those and learn the key teaching points with those, because you're much more likely to stick with them. Uncertainty, as I say, breeds anxiety. Finally, on this topic, we have self-efficacy and sport performance. So vast research suggests this link across individual and team sports. Self-efficacy improves performance, and the improved performance improves self-efficacy. It's a dialectic between the two. They're constantly reinforcing each other. You're stepping onto court, as we said, or you're stepping into a work situation where you feel very confident. You're more likely to perform at your best. So that's sources of self-confidence. So moving on to building self-confidence. What can we do to build our self-confidence, which is sort of the main crux of this podcast, because as I said earlier, there's a lot of information out there, but what can we do? How can we apply this research? Number one is focusing on performance accomplishments. So successful behavior increases confidence and leads to further successful behavior. Practice can leverage this by recreating competition conditions using practice to increase self-efficacy. Effective practice can improve self-efficacy physically, technically, and tactically. Focusing on improvement is critical and easily missed by some. So if we're practicing giving a speech at work, practice it in the room that you're going to deliver it in. If it's going to be at a certain time of day, practice it at that time of day. Practice it in front of a colleague you're comfortable with. We start low resolution and we make it sharper. So first of all, you're going to practice that at home. You're going to practice it in a different environment. You're going to practice it in the shower. You're going to practice it in your mind with imagery. You're going to practice and practice and practice until it's very comfortable and you can play with it because you've done it so much. It's about preparation and focus. It's there's no rocket. It's not rocket science. It's about doing the due diligence and getting in there and doing it. And then as we get closer and closer to delivery, we need to make it more and more specific. Practice can leverage this by recreating competition conditions. So obviously it applies to sport, but think about that. How can that work in your life? What do you need to do and improve at, and how can you leverage these ideas? Next step is acting confident. Acting confident gives us an air of confidence and can create a feeling of confidence when you're not feeling it. So, you might not be feeling confident, but stand tall, stand up, broaden that chest. We can start, trick ourselves into feeling confident, and then all of a sudden we start to get this sort of feedback loop going. So the opposite is true. Yourself. It's hard to be confident with poor posture and you're really closed in on yourself, and you're biting your nails and your hand, you're fiddling around with your mouth and you're scratching, touching your face. You might not be feeling confident before you give a speech or before you go onto court to do whatever. Give yourself that. Play a role. Be an actor. You might find that that's the catalyst to stepping on court or starting your pitch or your presentation or whatever. And once you get off onto a good foot, the confidence flows. And if you are competing against other people, that confidence is communicated in the way you hold yourself. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that, when your opponent sees a very confident person, they start to have doubts. A lot of the people, when you're giving a presentation, they see someone confident, they assume they're confident. And for what us might be a little mistake, which could throw us off, people don't even notice. We can be very self-critical when it comes to it. The audience didn't even pick it up. So act confident, and if you make a mistake, own it. Keep going. Oh, I messed up. Okay. Who cares? I've seen people delivering speeches to like a huge audience and they mess up and they just don't care. They don't care. They just roll on. That champion mindset. They got very, very poor memory. They don't care. They're just like, I'm moving forward and I'm just going to keep going. Ourselves, when we're not confident, it kind of slips in and we start to tongue-tied. Act confident. Respond with confidence, very much similar. When something happens, respond with confidence. Make a mistake, have a laugh with it. If you do make a mistake, use the acronym ACT. This is to accept, to center, and then think. So what does that break down as? Accept what has happened. Own your responsibility towards it. Keep posture strong. Breathe deeply and relax. Use self-talk phrases to narrow focus and attend to the present and what is controllable. Accept it. Move forward. And that becomes a habit. Early doors, it might take a bit of time, but that can become a habit. You could drop the ball somewhere. It's like, it's okay. You responded to that issue with confidence. We've seen people do some pretty crazy things, embarrassing things, and they just dust themselves up and they go again. They respond with confidence. They're focused on the moment. They're not focused on what other people think. That's irrelevant to them. Thinking confidently. Now, this is one thing I really press on my clients, is to silence negative self-talk. Stop negative thoughts. Don't call yourself weak, stupid, anything like that. Positive self-talk is obviously best, but first of all, we need to cut off away the negative. I hope this, I hope that, no good. I plan to. You act in the world. You do this, you do that. If you do call yourself, give yourself negative self-talk, make it more neutral. And then from there, make it more positive. Remember past successful performances and forget poor performances. I know they can really stick in our mind. It's the way, but use that as a lesson. Prepare better next time. We talked about this before for sources of confidence. Now, building confidence, use imagery to make a highlight reel of your past performances. I picked that up from a sports psychology book. It was a great idea. Think about all the things you've done in your life well. Get that video running 24/7 in your head. And people don't want to feel false confidence. It's like, well, if you're not going to do it, if you don't have that voice in your life, that person, you have to be that person. So give yourself some credit, build your confidence, use that imagery, and use the cinema screen in your head. Because a lot of adults, we've lost that ability. Kids can see very clearly in their minds. They've got their imagination for days. We lose that as we get older. So we have to build that skill back up. And it might be difficult early doors because we're not used to using imagery. We're not used to seeing that in our mind. And imagery isn't just visual as well. It's all the senses. So never forget that. Sense of smell, sound, and that emotional response. You might have a goal, see yourself achieving that goal, but what will it feel like when it's done? You have like a sense of relief and positive emotion coursing through your veins. You can harness that whenever you like, So you had that past performance, you did very well. What did it feel like? Spend time, ignore these celebrities and these sports stars and these soap opera star. Who cares about these people? You need to be focusing on what you're going to do if you're going to perform at your best. Using goal mapping, next one. So drawing up a multi-goal map along with short, medium and long-term goals, as well as a reliance on process and performance goals rather than just outcome goals. This has been shown to be very effective. So if you don't know what the difference is between process and performance goals, go back to the goal setting podcast, which was the previous one. Goal maps can include performance charts, evaluations, and progress. Some people can get some of the logistically minded people can have very elaborate goals maps. And why not? If that's you, go for it. You got staircasing of goals. We start with a very short term and it keeps going up and up and up and up and up, all the way to that long term goal. Chart it out, make it bright and colourful. Make it be interesting to look at because you're going to look at it often. Map it out. And it's not like it's set in stone because there's deviation. There's always a chance to move it around a little bit because we're always going back and re-evaluating. Make it visual and look at it. Put it somewhere prominent so you can see it. There's nothing worse than doing something colourful like that and something interesting. Something that's going to help us achieve our goals and then hiding it away. So goal mapping, that can build confidence because we've got that sense of momentum. We can see where we were, where we are now, where we're moving forward. So another one is optimizing physical conditioning and training. This is more specific to fitness and exercise and sport, of course, but being in peak physical condition gives athletes confidence that they can outlast the competition. And it's not so easily applied to non-physical domains, but if you're getting enough sleep and you're eating well and you're rested, if you're going for this presentation, got a presentation to your boss's boss, the CEO is coming down to look at the department, but you're not getting enough sleep, you're not eating well. It's not the same as peak physical conditioning as an athlete, but it's similar. You need to do the right things to get yourself in the right position. If you've competed in sport and you're going in not thinking you're physically fit enough, you got a bit of uncertainty about your fitness, no good. You can't have that concern because that will that'll break into your focus and your confidence because you can't last. So you've got that uncertainty there. Next one is preparation. Preparations require a detailed strategy for achieving a certain goal. In addition, a pre-competition routine is required to ensure competitors are in the right headspace to be at their best. How much have you prepared? Have you got this kind of broad long-term plan which you can implement for preparation? Have you mapped it out? Have you got the day mapped out but also what are you going to do in the last 5-10 minutes before this thing happens, whatever it is. The self-talk, the imagery, what is it you need, well, the key 3 points that you need to hit. Because when you're well prepared, you're more confident, and if something does go awry, you can just switch focuses. If you're not prepared, no chance. It's just like it's going to collapse on you. So the final 2 of these ways of building confidence: fostering a social climate. So this is more for a management person or someone or a coach. How do they create that social climate? It's more their kind of responsibility. So within a team environment, the climate is usually a construct of the coach and perhaps team. Led by the coach tends to be leadership style, type of goals, evaluation, social support, and feedback styles that all contribute to this social climate. Now, some people don't think about how this implements, but it's obviously the more thought that goes into this, the better. To create a positive climate for individuals, they can create their own environment to facilitate self-confidence, such as skill execution and achievement behaviors. So you might not be the coach, you might be not able to affect the broader climate, but what can you do individually to create your own environment? So what they say is looking at skill execution and achievement behaviors. See, athletes are encouraged to base their confidence on more self-regulatory control of perceptions, behaviors, and emotions. So they are not so reliant on the inconsistent self-confidence that emerges from social environmental factors. Because if it's always given to you by your manager or coach, you're not able to construct it yourself, then what if your coach leaves? You get a new boss comes in who's not that person. Self-regulatory control of perceptions, behaviors, and emotions. Okay, so if things are going wrong, how do we ensure it isn't exploding out and it's worse than it really is? Check out that video on the horse and the monkey. It's like when we're focused, our behavior is different compared to when we're not. So how do we manage our perceptions and our behaviors? We focus on what we need to be looking at, or we kind of scatterbrain all over the place? Behavior, are we doing what we need to do? We're going to bed on time, we're doing our training, doing our stretching, doing our practice, doing our imagery of seeing ourselves do it well or not? So the final point of building self-confidence comes down to building team collective efficacy. Again, this kind of goes more towards the team side, so it's a bit more for coaches and for managers, but as individuals can still think about this. Research has suggested the 3 following dimensions when it comes to building team collective efficacy. The before competition zone or area is also called the production process, in which the focus is on developing perceptions of both capability and fitness of the entire group to prepare for upcoming competition. So this can start from day 1 after pre-season all the way up to the start of the season. Both capability and the fitness of the entire group. This is what we're aiming at. The aim is for the group to feel that they have the individual and collective physical and psychological resources to handle the upcoming challenges. Because as we said before, the difference between pressure and stress. Pressure, we have the resources to cope. Stress, we don't. So you want to maximize these resources so that confidence is at its absolute peak when the season begins. Because you might come up against another team or something, a key star player gets injured. We've got the resources to cope with it because we've built this up in the pre-season. Production process. Number 2, during competition, season started now, this is called the activation process, in which the focus is on having the team members believing in each other just before and during the games. You've got the short-term routine as you're stepping onto court and during the game. So you're high-fiving each other, giving each other encouragement. A team with strong confidence is noted as being enthusiastic, displaying willpower, persistence, and team morale. You go back to the 90s Man United team. How many times did they come back and win when they were losing? It was just, you just knew it. The opponents knew it, they knew it, we knew it watching. That team's confidence was unbelievable. It says here, because opponent teams display confidence, it is important for their own team to show their opponents they are confident and together. Because when you see a confident team, when you see a group act with confidence, that has an effect. Either you rise to that or you go, we're not up to that level. Because, confident teams, be it, as I keep saying, in sport or in business or whatever, or in a family unit, they display willpower and persistence and team morale because they've worked on this. So after competition, season's finished. evaluation process, in which intra-team interpretations of previous game leads to regaining confidence after defeats and enhancing confidence after victories, broadly speaking. So we've done the season, we've done the financial year, whatever the time marker is. We all sit down together as a team. What worked? What didn't work? What can we do better? Look back at the wins, the losses, the highs, the lows. Do we need to rebuild? Are we enhancing? Are we at top of our game? Where's the key points we need to improve? So further research also suggests that collective efficacy is the building blocks of task cohesion. And that's when a team is all performing at their peak, but also towards a shared goal, that cohesion towards a specific goal or task. Because you can have someone performing well, but they're not performing well towards a shared goal. Everyone's doing their bit to achieve the shared vision. The shared goal is a whole different kettle of fish, and that task cohesion comes in very importantly when we talk specifically about a high performance team working towards achieving said goal. Everyone's part of it, they're motivated. So there's quite a dump of information there. Sources of self-confidence, building self-confidence, and it's about finding what works for you. Go back, if there's areas in your life which you're not as confident as you need to be, focus on those. Think about the ones which are most important too. We might want to be confident in something which is sort of adjacent but not too closely linked to what we're doing. Is that the most important? Is that where we need to focus? These are the questions you need to ask yourself. This is something I help my clients with. So if you're struggling with confidence in your specific domain, get in touch and be happy to talk through that with you. I'm going to leave you with a few points of last few points of evidence. So during the Nagano Olympic Games, the Winter Olympics that was, they had 63 high-performing athletes. They were all interviewed. 90% stated that their levels of self-confidence were very high, and that was key to them performing at their best. Seems straightforward. I mean, if you argue the point that confidence is important to performance, then I don't know what to tell you, but it seems pretty clear to me. So in the absence of self-confidence, increases in competitive anxiety intensity were perceived as outside of the performer's control and debilitating to performance. I've had that. You're trying to tell yourself to calm down and relax before something's going on, but your body is just ramping up. Maybe because the confidence isn't where it needs to be. To build that up slowly, using those methods we've talked about. So under conditions of high self-confidence, increases in symptoms were reported to lead to a positive perceptions of control, facilitative interpretations. So when you're confident and those same symptoms ramp up, as we spoke before, there's a reversal theory where those pre-competition nerves actually, people like that. People high in confidence because there's like, this is me getting into my competition zone. Heart's racing. There was a case of a famous MMA fighter who was retired for many years through injury, came back to fight, and he was worried in the build-up to the fight because he wasn't anxious. He wasn't nervous. His heart wasn't, he wasn't a bit twitchy because he needed that. He knew that's when he was performing at his best because your body, he's preparing to fight. So, your body needs to kind of get into that state. And once it started to work, he's like, he relaxed then. He was like, okay, cool. I'm getting into that position. I'm getting into that place. And it's different for different people. As I say, Roger Federer, maybe he doesn't feel it as much. Maybe other people, they're a bit all antsy, but we have to find what works for us. So to protect against debilitating interpretations of competitive anxiety, performers reported the use of cognitive confidence management strategies, including mental rehearsal, thought stopping, and positive self-talk. So a lot of what we talked before, so we need to find what works for us, and we need to practice that before we practice, We don't just roll in and practice our speech or whatever it is. We need to do our self-talk, our mental rehearsal, thought stopping as well. Practice like shutting off thoughts. How long does that last? Extending that. When we're in that monkey model, impulsive thinking, the mind's just racing. But when we're calm and collected, we're not thinking about too much. So I just wanted to leave you with a famous example of confidence coming from Michael Jordan himself. This was an advert where he listed all the times he'd failed, all the times he'd been tasked with taking the game-winning shot and missed and lost the game, how many times he'd failed over and over and over again, And his perception was that's what gave him confidence. In the face of countless failures, he kept pushing because, he failed quite a few times, but he persevered more and more. He stepped over the failures and continued to strive towards confidently attaining his goals. And, proof's in the pudding. He did that. Anytime he lost, he came back and worked harder and harder and harder and harder. Because people see people which are successful and go, oh, they must have had it all work out for them. They're so lucky, blah, blah, blah. No, it's not how it works. The champions have failed more than most, but they didn't give up. They used that for motivation to keep going. That's what we need to do. So there we go. That wraps up episode 6 of the Druid High Performance podcast about self-confidence. This one, lots of really good information out from the literature there. Please like and subscribe. If you want to be more confident in your day-to-day life and specifically to your activities that you feel are important to you, get in touch. Email info@druidhighperformance.com and leave a comment on this one. As I say, we should all be aware of this stuff, but we're not as confident as we need to be, but it's within your hands to be so. Go out there, be your most confident self, and go back and listen to the other podcasts on focus and effective goal setting, because you get these three things working for you. You're going to have that horse in front of the cart, and it's going to really propel you along, and you're not going to have to do too much thinking, because a lot of it will be automatic processing. So this is Drew signing off. Back next month for another podcast. All the best, and have a good one.